maybe 5 different record labels. When I went to them to say, okay, my next project, we're going to talk about the next project. And they kept saying, well, I think you should do a John Coltrane tribute album. And I said, no. I said, every time I play, it's a tribute to John Coltrane. So after thinking about it, I started saying, well, what if I did? What would I do? And I started compiling songs, and I started going back and doing research, and that's basically how it happened. John Coltrane is probably the hardest working musician I've ever had the pleasure to be around. This man worked so hard. I mean, I know you know the stories, but he worked so hard that I think he's the first musician to move music to another level, in that he trumped the cycle of fifths. The cycle of fifths is how you move music from one tonal center to another. He found another way to utilize the cycle of fifths by his giant step changes. And I think, like a lot of his ideas that he developed or was developing, he didn't live long enough to follow all of them. And I think musicians have been lax in exploring just a few of the things that he was working on, because he worked so hard. He would work on one idea or one concept, and before he followed it to a conclusion, he was off on another one. And so consequently, he's left us with many things, like Charlie Parker, like all the great musicians have, Lester Young. They've all left us many things that we can still go back and explore. John Coltrane knew about me before I knew about him. And I'll backtrack and tell you what I mean. He was working with Bull Moose Jackson, you know, the R&B band, Who Threw the Whiskey in the Well, I Love You, Yes I Do, out of Philadelphia. He and Benny Golson were working with Bull Moose, and they had 2 weeks in Baltimore. Well, the second week got canceled, and so they stayed in Baltimore for the second week, and they came to this jam session that I was at one afternoon, because I was only about 14 years old. And so Benny Golson he told me the story. He said, yeah, we went back, me and John, and we were talking about, man, you got to hear this little young alto player down in Baltimore. So, but that was the first time I met him. And then I met him, you know, through the years. I met him when he was with Miles. I met him, you know, I used to, after meeting him a few times, we got to know each other, you know, and so but I was always very shy around him. I was just in such awe of him. You know, I could never seem to ask the right questions. And it's funny because Benny Golson tells me the same thing happened to him and John when they actually went to see Dizzy Gillespie and heard Bird working, and they were just in awe. And after the show, they waited backstage, and accompanied Bird, took his horns home and was asking him all these questions, you know, and not the right questions, but they were asking him questions about mouthpieces and reeds and all of that. So I felt the same way. I didn't know what to say. I just was glad to be around him. I think I've been around 2 people in my lifetime that had the aura that I think Jesus or, you know, a great saint would, and that's John Coltrane is definitely one of them. Actually, when I was working with Art one time, after I joined the Messengers, we did a show we did 3 weekends after we came back. This was '65. Cincinnati Jazz Festival, or Cleveland, I'm not sure which one it was in Ohio. We were in the baseball stadium, and we played right before John's band played. And so when we were walking off and they were coming on, you know, we spoke, hey, and he said, oh, you sound good. And so I floated up to and then he played something that night, me and John Hicks, because John was also in the Messengers with me. We went up into the stands to listen, and John was playing something that I've never heard him play before. And that's why I would go to see him every night, because every night was something different, totally different. because he was working all day. He's practicing all night and all day. So by the time the next gig, he had something new every time. But this particular night, I was waiting on records to hear this. This was something, and I can't even explain it, you know, but the lay people that went to see Nancy Wilson, and the more popular, I love Nancy Wilson, I'm not saying anything about it, but I'm just saying they were not, that's who they came for. They didn't come to, so they were leaving. And John and I were looking and saying, oh my God, how can you leave when he's playing this great music, you know? But anyway, I heard it. I stayed. Well, Coltrane rules kind of, you know, it's got the double meaning. It's double entendre there. So, I look at him as a warrior of music. You know, he was, as Miles is most artists. I look at artists as warriors of art warriors. I think Picasso was a warrior, and so that's how I kind of look at what we do. Because see, I think you have musicians who play music, they'll take any gig, anywhere for pay. That's what their job is. Then you have artists whose medium happens to be music. That's a whole different ballgame. And so, you know, most of the time I try to fall into the latter category as an artist who uses music as his medium, which is why I hate that term, you know, the J-word term. Tao, well, that means the way. So, you know, like if you're a martial artist, the Tao of Kung Fu, the Tao of, it means, so the way of a music warrior is what I mean by that.